Sacramento's district attorney announced over the weekend that the city would not charge the two police officers who shot and killed an unarmed black man last year. You recall this story? 22-year-old Stephon Clark was fatally shot while running from police. He was shot 8 times in his grandmother's backyard. The DA said officers' use of force was lawful. So Sam Stanton is a reporter for the Sacramento Bee, and he joins us now from Sacramento to talk about this decision. So Sam, a reminder to people about this story. He ran into the backyard of his grandmother. He had a cell phone in his hand, and police say they thought the cell phone might have been a gun. Can you take us through why the DA decided not to prosecute these two officers, despite what's known about Clark's death, particularly being shot in the back?
Sure. It's been nearly a year since the shooting. She's been reviewing it since October, and her report that came out on Saturday was 61 pages long. And basically, she determined that the evidence showed the officers had a legitimate, reasonable fear for their own safety, and under California law, which dates back to 1872, they were justified in using deadly force against him. Now, obviously, the civil rights activists who are involved in this matter disagree vehemently. The Attorney General is doing his own investigation. We're awaiting the results of that. So there's still the potential for criminal charges to be filed, but there is not a great expectation that that will be the case.
Clark's family has been very outspoken. His brother has questioned why the district attorney released information about Stephon being possibly suicidal before he was killed. And do you know whether or not that factored in the city's decision not to charge the officers?
That's right. Stephon was at a news event yesterday that I was at, where he was saying that basically the DA vilified his dead brother by releasing this information. The district attorney maintains that all of this material, the domestic violence case that he was involved in allegedly, the text messages between Stephon and his girlfriend, and the suicidal research he did on the internet that weekend that he was shot, is relevant to her decision. And part of her argument is all of this material, if she had filed charges against the officers, would have been presented to the defense. So the defense could have used that in court. She didn't feel that she could hide it, so it's all out there in the report, and it's, it contains some very disturbing back and forth between the girlfriend and Stephon, and the family and the activists are outraged over the release of this.
Clark's family has, in fact, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Sacramento. They're seeking $20 million in damages. What is the family's argument in this suit, and how do they feel the city is responsible? Well,
they've complained that there were other ways to subdue Clark, that he didn't need to be shot, that clearly he was not armed, and that, I mean, the main argument is you had a young man here who was being chased for breaking car windows, who ended up dead in his grandparents' backyard. I spoke to the family attorney yesterday who said, if he was suicidal, this was certainly a strange way to commit suicide by cop, running to your grandparents' house and knocking on the door to be let in. So they maintain that the officers acted irresponsibly, weren't trained properly. They initially filed a claim with the city seeking $35 million. The lawsuit filed in January seeks at least $20 million. And the city responded to this, ironically, on Friday with an answer that was filed in federal court here, basically denying all the claims. That denial, which is a routine matter in court, came one day before the mayor came out and apologized for Stephon Clark's death.
Oh, that's interesting. The mayor apologized. Okay. Because often the follow-up question is, what are you apologizing for, of course, if you're not responsible, if the city's not responsible in any way. The decision has sparked protests throughout Sacramento. Can we expect those to continue? And what other actions could activists be taking in regards to this case?
Well, so far, the day of the district attorney's announcement, the protesters went to the police headquarters and marched in the parking lot, burned blue flags in the parking lot. Yesterday, they went to the city's largest shopping mall, which led the management of the mall to shut it down on a Sunday, losing untold business revenues there. Today, activists are going to go to the Attorney General's office to deliver a letter asking him to file criminal charges against the officers. And then later tonight, there's the Sacramento Kings game. Last year during the protests, a couple of the games were disrupted by protesters who surrounded the arena. They ended up having to place a fence around the entire arena site last year. So far, they haven't done that this year. We're waiting to see if that happens. Then tomorrow there's going to be a city council meeting, then another Kings game on Wednesday. So the authorities here are on high alert. They're trying to keep the city calm. And the protests last year, as loud and as disruptive as they were mostly peaceful. They're hoping that that's going to be the case now, but they're clearly ready. They had dozens of CHP units here over the weekend guarding the freeway ramps because the protesters shut down one of the freeways last year. So at this point, they're just waiting to see where this thing goes, but there clearly will be more protests.
Yeah, well, emotions certainly will be running high now that we know the outcome, now that we know that the officers are not being charged. But as I understand it, though, police are still investigating, and so there may be some repercussions for the officers after the police investigation, the internal investigation is wrapped up.
That's right. The police are waiting for the Attorney General's report to be filed. There's also a federal review of both the Attorney General's review and the district attorney's. And the police, once everything is done, will determine whether the officers acted within departmental policy. They could be cleared and remain on the job. They could be fired. It just depends on what the police department and the city manager's office decide.
All right, Sam, thank you so much.